Donahue. Reporting out of closed session.
Thank you. The Emeryville City Council met in closed session on the items listed on the closed session agenda. Regarding item 5.1.1, an update was provided and direction given. Regarding item 6.1.1, on a motion by Member Martinez, seconded by Mayor Bowders, the City Council authorized authorized the City Attorney to enter into settlement on this matter. Regarding item 6.1.2, an update was provided and direction given. Regarding item 6.2.1, an update was provided and direction given. Thank you.
Thank you. The time is 6:58, Madam Clerk. That meeting is adjourned. We are in recess till 7:14 p.m.
Like weapons, the men with big mouths with more money behind them, give them a loud shout, willing to fuel with their hearts in their hands, respect the thieves that come to steal their homes. Frail souls read old news long as it is in some deep water to the safety of the dunes. We thought we had far too much to lose, so we stood behind the barrier to get the clearest view. We struggle. Children, the ones that fell before them, speak now. Should have spoken then, for the only one the war is we sat back to watch them win. You know me, I will if you will, you will if I was, so we never did begin. Here we are, sitting shouting down the walls like they were the leaders of the world. We struggle. Ooh, Lord, I need your love so bad, darling. Gotta help me, baby. I need your love. I need to come to me, say, if you don't help me, babe, I got to go out on the street and find somebody else to love. Oh, yeah. I may have to wash, may have to sew, may have to cook. Your love so bad, darling. Oh, yeah. If you don't have me, baby, oh, Lord, Lord. You have to go out on the street and find somebody else to love. Bring my luncheon. Yes, I am. Lord, Lord, Lord. I need some love, and yes, I do, child. Help me, baby. Oh, yeah. Need your love every day and every night. If you don't hear me, baby, Lord, 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 go out on the street and find somebody else to share. Help!
p.m. Drew, are you ready? You ready now? Okay. Time is 7:14 p.m. Call to order the meeting of the Management of Emeryville Services Authority. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Councilmember Pat?
Here.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent, and Mayor Bowders.
Here. Vice Mayor Medina has an excused absence this evening. At this time, I'll take a motion to approve the final agenda.
So moved.
I second.
I have a motion from Member Martinez and a second from Member Pats to approve the agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bowders?
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
I'll say that at the end.
We just said Vice Mayor Bowders, so Mayor Bowders
I'm
is an
sorry.
aye.
I mixed myself up.
That's okay, aye. Ex parte communications?
None.
None. Public comment for consent agenda items not on this agenda within the service area of the Management Services Authority? Seeing none. Consent calendar, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
I second.
I have a motion from Member Martinez and a second from Member Donahue to approve the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
The time is 7:15, Madam Clerk. That meeting is adjourned. Time is 7:15. I call to order the City of Emeryville, a successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. Madam Clerk, please note that all members excepting Vice Mayor Medina are present for this meeting. I'll take a motion to approve the final agenda.
I so move.
Second.
There's a motion from Member Donahue and a second from Member Martinez to approve the agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
Ex parte communications, members? Seeing none. Public comment for the consent agenda or items not on the agenda within the scope of the redevelopment agency? Seeing none. I'll take a motion on the consent calendar.
I move.
Second.
Motion from Member Donahue and a second from Member Martinez to approve consent. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
Okay, this is 7:16. That meeting is adjourned. And I call to order the City Council of the City of Emeryville's general meeting. We're now on the green agenda, folks. Members of the public, if you have an agenda item for which you wish to make a comment on tonight, you can accelerate yourself in the comment line. There are speaker cards in front of the city attorney. You can put your name and the agenda item number, and I will call those speakers first when we reach those items. Madam Clerk, please note that all members excepting Vice Mayor Medina with an excused absence are present. I'll take a motion to approve the final agenda.
I so move.
Second.
A motion from Member Donahue and a second from Member Martinez to approve the agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
So we have two proclamations on the special orders of the day today. And the first of those is a proclamation recognizing Older Americans Month. And there's a few happy people over here. Do we have someone who's here tonight to receive this proclamation, Joyce? Sure. And what's your name? Winifred. Would you guys like to join me up here? So we have a short proclamation, and then we're going to invite our guests to speak and receive this. So May is Older Americans Month in Emeryville and the United States. And whereas within the city of Emeryville reside countless older Americans who enrich and strengthen our community. And whereas the city of Emeryville is committed to engaging and supporting older adults, their families, and caregivers, and whereas we acknowledge the importance of taking part in activities that promote physical, mental, and emotional well-being, no matter your age. And whereas the city of Emeryville can enrich the lives of individuals of every age by promoting home and community-based services that support independent living, involving older adults in community planning, events, and other activities, and providing opportunities for older adults to work, volunteer, learn, lead, and mentor. Now therefore be it resolved that as mayor of the city of Emeryville and on behalf of the city council of the city of Emeryville, I do hereby proclaim May 2018 to be Older Americans Month, and urge every resident to take time during this month to recognize older adults and the people who serve them as vital parts of our community. Proclaimed on this 15th day of May 2018 at a regular meeting of the City Council by the Mayor of the City of Emeryville. And I'll hand this off to you. Would you like to make some remarks?
We would each like to make a short remark.
Please, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we address the city council?
Would you like to turn around instead?
Yes,
or you can use the microphone and sit on the other side.
Okay. Yeah.
It's on.
Okay, thank you. I particularly want to...
Maybe it didn't turn on.
Yeah, it's on.
There you go.
I particularly want to thank the city council for doing what it says in this, for making it possible for older people to participate in the community, and indeed for encouraging older people to participate in the community, like that guy Bill over there. Right here, right? So thank you very much. I'm the chair of the Commission on Aging. Winifred is the vice chair.
Well, just that Emeryville is a great city, and having our senior center is incredible. When I moved here, I found out the senior center was just a few blocks from my house. And first I said, oh, I don't want to be taking exercise classes with all these old people. And when I went over there, and the classes are all fabulous, the teachers, the environment. So thank you very much for having the senior center for us, and at a very good price.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us this evening for that. And we have one other proclamation, a proclamation proclaiming May 19th, 2018 as Kids to Parks Day in the city of Emeryville. Whereas May 19th, 2018 is the 8th Kids to Parks Day organized and launched by the National Park Trust, held annually on the 3rd Saturday of May. And whereas Kids to Parks Day empowers kids and encourages families to get outdoors and visit America's parks. And whereas it is important to introduce a new generation to our nation's parks. And whereas we should encourage children to lead more active lifestyles to combat the issues of childhood obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and other conditions associated with inactivity. And whereas Kids to Parks Day is open to all children and adults across the country to encourage a large and diverse group of participants. And whereas the residents of the city of Emeryville, including children, youth, families, adults, and seniors, as well as businesses, community organizations, and visitors, benefit from the wide range of parks, trails, and green space, including Doyle Hollis Park, Marina Park, East Shore State Park, Point Emery, Temescal Creek, Joseph Emery Park, the Park on Powell Dog Park, which I believe is named Paper Mill Park.
Okay.
Yes. I'm pretty sure it's Paper Mill Park, and many other parks experiences provided by the city of Emeryville. And whereas Kids to Parks Day will broaden a child's appreciation for nature and the outdoors, therefore be it resolved now that as mayor of the city of Emeryville and on behalf of the city council of the city of Emeryville, I hereby proclaim May 19th, 2018 as Kids to Parks Day and urge Emeryville residents to make time on May 19th to take children in their lives to a neighborhood, state, or national park. Proclaimed on the 15th day of May 2018 at a regular city council meeting by the mayor of the city of Emeryville. And we do not have a recipient tonight.
We don't, but I'm going to send that to the National Park Trust tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Item 5 is announcement of committee and commission vacancies. Madam Clerk.
Last meeting, I reported that we're going to be doing our annual recruitment for expiring terms on our committees and commissions. We were originally planning to do the appointments and interviews on June 24th. However, we are now going to do those on July 10th, and the applicants are going to be notified of that. Thank you.
Okay. Council member special announcements or reports on meetings attended. I'll start with Council member Pats. None. Council member Donahue?
None.
None. And Council member Martinez?
Just a couple. I just wanted to thank staff and city council for a great bike to work day and the grand opening at Palo Park. It was a really great event, and if folks haven't been down to see the murals and the great landscaping and the great path at Palo Park, I encourage you to go down and check it out. We also have a couple of things coming up on May 31st. There's a film showing at ECCL called Black Fatherhood, Trials and Tribulations, Testimony and Triumph. That's at the Emeryville Center of Community Life on May 31st at 6 p.m. And you can check out the event for that on Facebook. And then finally, somebody else was probably going to bring this up, but I've got it right in front of me. There's an Art Center listening session happening on May 22nd at 7 p.m. It's here, right here in this room, City Council chambers. Again, it's May 22nd at 7 p.m. For those who want to weigh in on what they'd like to see at Emeryville's future art center.
Great. I just want to echo Councilmember Martinez's sentiments regarding the grand opening of Palo Park and the art mural from Joey Rose Studio. That the event we had was very well attended. I want to thank the Broken Rack and Honor Bar for providing the refreshments to everybody that day. Beyond that, I want to thank the Emeryville Yacht Club for inviting me to their Cinco de Mayo party. I had not participated in a yacht club event ever, and it was quite festive. So I want to thank them for that. And lastly, I just want to report to the council that we will be discussing homeless services this evening and the mayor's conference. We had about a 90-minute meeting before the mayor's conference last week with Supervisor Carson and staff from the county to discuss homeless services, which will be a little more salient when we get to that agenda item. So with that, city manager's report.
No report this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, ex parte communications. Any members wish to report? Anybody?
Nope.
No. I do not have any either. Okay, public comment for the consent agenda or items not on the agenda.
Okay, first off, I'd like to announce to everybody here that this is a legitimate meeting. The first legitimate meeting, I think, since 2001. It's legitimate because people in wheelchairs could be here. And I know it because I tested it before I came here. I pushed the button, the ADA button, to allow wheelchairs, people in wheelchairs to enter this building, and it worked. First time since 2001. So Emeryville made it. So next is the police department. We have to fix the problem whereby if the public interacts with their police in the lobby, they put their life at risk because it's a death trap, because it's a fire hazard. If the fire happens, the elevator stops working and there's no escape, and people will die. So that's the next problem. We solved this one, took from 2001 until 2018 to solve the ADA door. I hope it's not going to take that long to solve the problem at the fire department. And last time I was here, I talked about it, and I mentioned it was $4.5 million was the remodel of the fire department. I looked it up, and it was actually 2.7 million. So, still, we should have gotten legal egress for 2.7 million. But today is a good day. We got the wheelchairs accessible city council meetings. Okay, so I just wanted to say real quickly about number 4, proclamation, City of Emeryville, Older Americans Month. That's a euphemism. Every single person is an older American. Every American is older because everybody's older than somebody. So it's a meaningless, we shouldn't call it Older Americans Month. I think we should call it Old Americans, or as, maybe even better as Thurgood Marshall, the late great Thurgood Marshall. Somebody asked him once about being old, and he said basically it sucks. And then he said that it's, what's wrong with it? And he said something like, I remember watching, he said, because I'm old. I'm like, and then he corrected himself. He said, I'm a geezer. And so I think we should, instead of calling it Older Americans Month, I think we should call it Geezer American Month in Emeryville. I was a geology major, so old is like really relative. So we should just say Geezer American Month. That's what I propose, that we change the name from Older American to Geezer American Month in Emeryville. Thank you. May.
And I am old. So with that comment, does anyone want to follow that act? Make a public comment at this time?
Actually, I came to speak on another matter, but something has come to my attention and to the attention of a lot of people there. As you may know, there's still in the works coal trains coming through our area into Oakland and out to the port. Mr. Tagani just got a big boost this week, and his thing was tentatively sort of approved. I would hope that the city of Emeryville will continue its progressive ways and thoroughly and vitally oppose this. It's a environmental and lethal matter that could be devastating to the health of all Emeryville people. So I would encourage the city to get together with Oakland. Hopefully Berkeley, I would think, would be doing something on it, and maybe have a unified force and get the state involved, because those trains are full of coal are going to be crossing the state. But I hope you can, I think you ought to re-enter that debate. And, you know, it's a matter of, grave matter of our health. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other members of the public who wish to speak for items not on the agenda or the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none. I just want to make a brief comment, Chair's privilege, and just respond to the coal question. And yes, the development is troubling. I represent Alameda County on the Air District Board, and the dust from the coal is something that we will be discussing because of the harmful impacts to the entire community in the East Bay. There are limits as to what the city of Emeryville can do, because the law actually, it's mostly federal. There's some state law, and it's the city where the terminus of a station is. So Oakland has the only state authority to deal with some of it. We've looked into that when Lonnie Hancock ran a bill, but we will, I think we have discussed previously our opposition to this. Member Martinez.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point that symbolically, council previously has joined the No Coal in Oakland movement with a resolution, so you know where our hearts are.
I send that.
Yes. Okay. With that, we'll move to the consent calendar. I'll entertain a motion.
I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion from Member Donahue and a second from Member Martinez to approve the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
We move to item 11, which is a public hearing, which is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville granting a waiver from the noise ordinance to DPR Construction between May 21st, 2018 and July 14th, 2018 for 8 weekdays of work between 6 p.m. and 2 a.m., 1 weekday of work between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m., and 1 Saturday of work between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. at the Cliff Bar offices located at 1400 65th Street, Suite 200 in the City of Emeryville. Inavar.
Hi, good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor. I think you just gave the whole presentation right there, so.
So that's the title.
made my job easy tonight. So yes, everything that Mayor Bowders just said. So for background, Cliff Bar has obtained building permits to expand their existing corporate office space at 1465th Street. Construction outside of permitted hours is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pardon me, is a permitted hour. So anything outside of that lands us here at City Council. And the reason they're asking for this is that the work that they need to do will impact employees and prohibit egress in and out of the building. So it's a safety concern during working hours, which kind of correlates with the 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the Saturday crane pick may or may not be necessary. They're not sure at this point, but they're asking for it in case there isn't another way to get the rooftop equipment in place. And that would need to be done on a Saturday to minimize parking and traffic impacts on 66th Street. So the request is for 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. For 3 consecutive weekday nights for concrete demolition, 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. for 1 weeknight for roto hammering into an existing concrete column foundation, and 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. for 4 consecutive weeknights for setting bridge and stair elements. Now, as I said, after 6 p.m. is outside of hours, so the work would begin during normal hours but continue outside of it. There's also a request for 1 day for 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. work for a concrete pour, and then the Saturday work, as I mentioned, from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. on 66th Street. So the location of the crane work is outside of the building on 66th Street. So if we're here...
Is there a way to zoom this in?
Well, I can probably use another method to do it. I can exit the presentation for you, or I can...
It's okay, go ahead. I'm just trying to read what you have on this sheet.
We can also do that after the presentation, zoom in if you like.
Okay.
Basically, the block we're looking at here is the Emory Tech building. There's Hollis Street on the east side here, 65th Street on the south, 66 on the north. All of the work except for the crane is taking place where this little red mark is inside of the building. So all the work is within the building except for the crane. The crane work would be where these green marks are. This blue here, the applicant provided symbolizing that there's no existing residential units in this area. So the existing residents are across 65th Street and what's the avenue? No. Courtyards of 65th. Courtyards of 65th, thank you, the glass house, and there's a couple of units here at the corner. If you measure actually from the actual work site inside of the building, all of those residents would be outside of 300 feet from the work site, but from the property itself, they're within 300 feet. Let's see, moving forward. So this is zooming in to the actual property here. So there's a parking lot on the corner. Hollis is here again. 65th is at the bottom of the picture. 66 is at the top. The crane work would be outside here, and all other work would be within the building in this red zone here, you can see. So for notification, mail notifications were to all property owners and site addresses within 300 feet of 1465th Street. As I said, the parcel, not the actual location of the site work, and legal advertisement for Oakland Tribune. Staff believes that the request for morning and evening work indoors during the work week is reasonable to maintain a safe work environment during normal business hours, and staff believes that the request for Saturday work for a crane pick is reasonable, as this will limit traffic and parking impacts in the area. Residential impacts will be limited as the morning and evening work is indoors and the Saturday work is on a non-residential street. Also, the applicants Kelly Eads and Joel Savage from DPR are here as well, and they would like to address the council this evening.
Okay, before Navarre leaves the podium and we hear from the applicant, are there questions for Navarre? No? Okay, thank you. Welcome DPR to come and speak.
Yeah, hi, my name is Joel Savage. I'm a project engineer for DPR Construction, and I just want to reassure the City Council and the residents of Emeryville that we've taken every measure to limit our impacts with our construction activities to the community and to the city, and that these requests are made in the pursuit of public safety and not blocking egress during an occupied building's working hours. So we've kept it as minimal as we can to limit these impacts. So thanks for your consideration.
Okay, before you leave, are there questions for the applicant? Councilmember Martinez.
Okay, I have a few questions. How many construction workers do you expect on site for each of these periods?
These work crews would be, crane pick aside, they'll be like less than 6, per per activity. Crane pick will probably involve a number because we'll need traffic control and also people on the ground doing flagging and rigging and on the roof.
Okay. Well, that answers my question about parking impacts. That doesn't sound like a lot of added cars in the neighborhood.
And actually, as an update to the previous note, we have coordinated that the crane pick can take place from Cliff Bar parking spaces, so it should not have no parking impact.
Great. And in terms of expanding the office space, can you talk about the nature of what you're doing? Are you adding office space?
It's repurposing existing office space. It's a tenant improvement project. So Cliff Bar is taking over previously occupied tenant spaces to expand their office spaces.
So does that mean Cliff Bar is bringing in more employees?
Yeah.
Okay, because I had heard anecdotally that some folks had left that building. So I'm just wondering if we're going to get more people working in the neighborhood, more people eating at restaurants, more people frequenting businesses in Emeryville as a result of this work.
I believe so, and I think that the parking needs will be met by the adjacent parking structure. There's a lot of vacancy there currently, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Member Donahue, do you have questions?
Those covered all my questions. Thank you.
Member Pats? My only question is the total square footage of the interior work is how much?
Are you talking about for the variance or for the project?
The red square there.
Oh, it's less than 1,000 square feet.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have no more questions. You can have a seat. Thank you. And this is a public hearing. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to speak at the public hearing. Madam Clerk, the time is 7:38. The public hearing is open. Steve Bronson is first speaker at the public hearing. Wait till you get to the microphone, Steve.
I got this notice in the mail. It didn't discuss it very extensively, what was going to be done. The fact that they requested a noise variance is kind of troublesome. I would like to know the extent of this noise. I live at the Courtyards Apartments, and they want to have a noise variance until 2 a.m. So I would like to know the nature of why they needed a noise variance. And it sounds like it's going to be indoors, but yet they needed this variance. So I'm a little concerned about the peaceful enjoyment that we're entitled to within a couple blocks of that area, or live maybe close to 1,500 people or more, counting the condos on the other side of Hollis Street on 65th, going up the street. And so I'm just concerned about the actual noise that's going to happen. There wasn't anything on the notice we got that said where it exactly was or the nature of the noise involved. Maybe it's going to be nothing, but the fact that they needed a variance is kind of troublesome. So if that could be addressed, I would appreciate it, because
I'll make sure we address that for you.
Yeah. I'd like to be assured that the 1,500 people living in the area, it's become a residential area. It's no longer just as you know, it's no longer just a business area or commercial area. It's become a residential area. So I would like that to be taken into consideration. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there members of the public who wish to comment?
Okay, first of all, DPR Construction has no credibility. Now, that's the company that has just constantly violates our noise ordinance. For instance, at the transit center, they don't have a person answering the phone as they're contractually obliged to do. They have a contract with the city of Emeryville, and they haven't honored their contract. further, they're just constant violations of our noise ordinance. So they're not to be trusted. I mean, they're just, when we get lied to as many times as we have by DPR, there should be some consequences here. And I think you should have if you're inclined to say yes to this, you should put provisions in there whereby, we can slam the door on this easily and in a timely manner, because I think that's what you're going to end up having to do. The residents are going to be unhappy. And further, they're saying things here in their letter that they wrote to the city that there's things in here that are not, they're talking about time periods and what have you that are not, I don't think, accurate. They have to have 3 8-hour consecutive night shifts and for concrete demolition. There's nothing about concrete demolition that makes that the case. They just want to save money. And also they're talking about it's blocking the entrance of the building, but every building has two exits, or entrance and an exit, so that's false. So like they're saying things on this that are not true to you guys, so you should find out about that. And I don't think utterances of falsehoods should be condoned. But also to the staff, the staff is always recommending, except for the last meeting, which was an epic meeting where the staff finally did say no to a noise ordinance waiver request. The staff is always saying that when a developer wants to block traffic, that's a good reason to give a noise ordinance waiver, because on a Saturday it won't affect traffic very much. But you have to remember, the noise ordinance, Emeryville's noise ordinance, is not called the noise ordinance and free-flowing traffic ordinance. It's called the noise ordinance. So it speaks nothing about free-flowing traffic. The noise ordinance I'm talking about. It only speaks about noise, and so I don't think that's appropriate. The staff is continually putting in that provision in the noise ordinance waiver request. Or in other words, they always cite that as a reason why you should approve. And I don't think that's appropriate. I think the staff should not be doing that. As I said, for the reason I just said, because it weakens the noise ordinance to throw in that there's provided within that is or at least implicitly is the idea that there should be free-flowing traffic in Emeryville, because as I said, that ordinance does not cover that topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who wish to speak? We've already taken your public comment. Other members of the public? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, the time is 7:44. The public hearing is closed. Members, I have a couple questions for the applicant, but is that okay to do first, or would you like me to begin with you?
Questions,
okay.
Go ahead.
I'd like the applicant to come back up. So in light of public comment, I do have a couple questions for you. Do you agree that you have previously had a problem with the noise ordinance and compliance in our city?
I do believe at the Wareham project, there have been cases where the phone was not answered. The person who was listed as the primary contact was unavailable at the time that the call was received. And I do think it's a fair statement to say that there may have been a couple of times that happened before they found the right person to staff that phone number. And so I do think that that is a legitimate complaint that we did work to address and have since addressed.
Okay, and so because this is a short window of time, and the issue that's raised is about the enforcement of that, right? And so one of the things that I'm communicating very directly in a public meeting to you is the community does need to trust the contractors who do the work. We do a lot of construction in this community, and we need to balance the interest of residents. And so when the complaints come in that construction is being done outside of normal hours or even waivered hours for a noise ordinance, those complaints come to us if they are not being directed to you by answering the phone. And I do believe at some point that begs the question of whether we should approve requests from actors who have not, in good faith, kept their end of the bargain. So will there be somebody who answers the phone throughout this entire period in the event that somebody attempts to call it?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to list all our project team members' phone numbers on the public notice signage.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And Joel and I will personally have our numbers listed and make ourselves available.
Okay, I appreciate that. I know that that is a difficult thing to do at times for someone who's in the construction industry, but when the phone isn't picked up there, it becomes my phone and the phone of my colleagues we are being asked to address things that we are not even privy to on a nightly or daily basis. So you can understand the complexity of that for us in trying to balance your interest in moving this project along and our interest in ensuring the community has the livability it's requesting. Okay, are there other members who have questions while they're here?
Yeah, would you be willing to pay the homeowners for Glass House, the homeowners group, and I guess it's the directly next to Cliff Bar across the street, I've forgotten the name of that courtyard. For each infraction that is, if you go beyond this.
I want to stop the inquiry because this is a legal matter because it involves the actual ordinance. And so I want to check before you continue, Member Donahue, with the city attorney about whether this is an appropriate inquiry.
The remedy that the ordinance provides for violations of the noise ordinance is for the city to rescind
terminate the waiver.
The waiver, that's correct. So that is the remedy of the council that the council has.
Yes.
There is no penalty provision. That's a monetary penalty provision that's built into the ordinance, and so
Okay, point taken.
Okay. Do you have any other questions, Member Donahue?
No.
Thank you for entertaining my interruption. Any other questions over here? You can be seated. Thank you. I'll begin with you, though, Member Donahue, on comments at this point.
It seems DPR has been a problem in the past. We will be willing to shut it down if you violate what you say you're going to do. But if you do things how you have specified here, I'm prepared to vote yes.
Okay, Member Martinez.
So for members of the public who watch city council meetings, I'm sorry. But you may remember that we recently denied a noise waiver for Avalon Bay Housing, and my remarks at the time were that the request was not specific. It was not for specific work, and it was not for specific times, which I'm satisfied that this work is very detailed and to a good end. That said, we have the remedy of pulling this noise waiver if the applicant is in violation. So for tonight, I am prepared to approve this.
Thank you, Member Pats.
To echo to what Member Martinez just said, when I read this, it was the first one of these that I've read that made a lot of sense to me. It was very clear and very eloquent, and I appreciated that, and it was clear to me why the request was being made. I would like to say on the bad actor piece, I take you at your word, but it's not you whose reputation will be damaged if you don't follow through. It is Cliff Bar, and I have a special place in my heart for them because they are a good community partner and help out at a lot of city events, and so I'm going to implore you to make sure you uphold their quality name in our town. So with that, I'd like to move the item unless you have comments.
I do have just a brief comment, which is I want to be responsive to Steve's question. Steve asked the question earlier about why a variance was needed, and that seemed I'm not going to use your word, I'm going to use my word. It's alarming to a resident when they receive that a variance is needed. The only reason why we call this a waiver or variance from the normal rule is because we have a general default setting in the town that prescribes exactly what hours construction can take place. So any ask, regardless of how much noise, little or small, to do anything that qualifies as construction outside of those hours must be approved by the city council. So in this case, at 6 p.m. At 6 p.m., construction is supposed to stop at all sites in the city. That's to give people the peace and quiet of their evening. Whether it's indoors or outdoors, if a construction company or a applicant wishes to do any work after those hours, they have to ask for a waiver from the restriction from the city council, and we have to hear the facts about why they want it. In some cases, there are applicants who wish to do loud work on Saturdays or Sundays that block streets and traffic. As Councilmember Martinez noted, we had one in here at the public market last week who wanted every Saturday for the next year to do construction. And a bunch of neighbors came and said, I won't be able to enjoy my Saturday. That's where I'm at home on Saturday and I enjoy the peace and quiet. And we evaluated the type of construction they were going to do, which was outdoors, which was going to be very loud, and balance that against whether or not a whole year of taking resident Saturdays away made sense, and we voted no. In this case, we've heard that there are going to be 6 or fewer employees of the construction company. They're going to be working indoors on the opposite side of the building. And as you've heard from my colleagues, this is for a very short period of time, actually. It appears to be a very reasonable request. I do support the request, but I needed to make the inquiry I made of the applicant this evening because this applicant has worked on a prior project on an outdoor site and has not complied with the conditions that we've asked of them in the past, which has created problems for some residents. And so this is always a sticky subject for the City Council, Steve, because we have an obligation to help make sure that things get done that need to be built in the city and businesses can function on time. But at the same time, the priority is always the residents' well-being. And in this case, I've heard from all 3 of my colleagues that with an understanding that DPR is going to adhere to the terms of the waiver, and that they'll lose the right to do the construction if they violate those terms, people are supportive this evening. So I hope I've answered your question sufficiently because I appreciate you asking it. So the question for the public is that there's a question about who can you contact. DPR is required to post at the site the contact information for someone at DPR in the event that DPR is either working outside of the specified hours. You can always contact the Planning and Community Development Department here at City Hall if you are actually in your home and you hear noise at night that is disruptive. You can raise that issue, and then that is something that staff have the ability to administratively review to determine whether or not the waiver should continue. Yes, in fact, she's giving you your card right there. So hopefully that is permanently accessible to you now. The city number. Charlie, do we have a 24-hour line for that?
Yes, the police department.
You can contact the police department. There'll be a noise complaint on record, and then someone at staff will get it the next day. You're welcome. With that, I'll entertain a motion. I think we have one from Member Pats. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
A motion from Member Pats and a second from Member Donahue to approve the waiver. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
The waiver is approved. Thank you for attending. Item 12.1 is homeless services. Catherine Furpo, and I see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sub-resolutions to this item. So we'll have one presentation, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So members of the public who are interested in the homeless services item, there will be one public comment for all 4 subsections, which I will call before we discuss each resolution.
Correct. Good evening, Mayor, council members.
Good
My name
evening.
is Catherine. Sorry?
Good evening. Welcome.
Catherine Fripp, I'm the housing coordinator here at the City of Emeryville, and tonight we're talking about the homeless services and funding. Tonight we're going to have about 4 sections. This is, as you mentioned, there are 4 resolutions, and this is a broad issue, and we're going to talk about it in 4 separate sections. The first part is I want to talk about the current environment. As I think everybody is aware, the homeless situation in the Bay Area and California has gotten very impacted. It's gotten worse. Homeless people, people experiencing homelessness, and homelessness is a system that has a wide-ranging issues that lead to homelessness and create barriers for people to end their homelessness. Including economic issues, availability of housing, health issues, domestic issues, substance abuse, previous incarceration, and then for youth, a lack of a support system, both for transition age youth and for homeless children experiencing homelessness. There's obviously a shortage of housing in the Bay Area. We're all aware of that, and the high cost of the housing that we do have is increasing homelessness and is a barrier to preventing homelessness. And people who are experiencing homelessness have a wide range of needs that we're trying to work around. So in January of 2017, there was a homeless count, a point-in-time homeless count in Emeryville. 29 people experiencing homelessness were counted. That's changed significantly in the Bay Area since January of 2017, and all indications show that we will continue to have an increase in homelessness in our community. I want to point out this is actually Alameda County, the unsheltered and sheltered percentages. As the increase of people experiencing homelessness, this proportion is going to change. So I would say right now, because people who are experiencing homelessness is expanding much, much quicker than the ability to shelter them and shelter beds. So I would say now we're probably more at a 20-80% of unsheltered to sheltered people experiencing homelessness. I also want to point out that both Berkeley and Oakland have the highest incidence of homelessness in Alameda County, and both sheltered and unsheltered. In 2017, they accounted for 2/3 of the homelessness in Alameda County. So those are obviously our neighbors, and we're surrounded by them, and it's a regional problem, but it is concentrated around us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this again. This is Alameda County, it's not Emeryville. That single adults make up a large proportion of people experiencing homelessness, but this number in this statistic also includes TAY, transition-age youth. So our youth homelessness is higher than it appears here, because on the lower one, it's only children, unaccompanied children under the age of 18, but actually our youth, age 18 to 24, is a big proportion of our homeless single adults. Family homelessness is also on the increase, and as you can see in January of 2017, 96% of families experiencing homelessness were sheltered. That is no longer the case. We, again, I would say probably 80% of the families are sheltered. There's we'll talk about it later, effort to deal with those separately, deal with families experiencing homelessness separately, but I would say it's about 80-20 at this point. So I want to take a second to talk about how we got where we are in homeless policy. The second Bush administration, so we're going back pretty far, really took a deep dive into homelessness and homeless policy, and they came up with some policies that are being used in all federally funded programs that fund services and housing for people experiencing homelessness, including the Continuum of Care and Emergency Solutions Grant. And those policies are a housing first policy, low barrier services, an emphasis on chronically homelessness, and the demand that each coordinated continuum of care has a coordinated entry system. So I'm just going to go a little bit into the wonkiness, sorry. Housing First, I think, is important to understand. Housing First is a policy to put people in housing before you address the other contributing factors. So before you address substance abuse, and before you address other barriers to them maintaining their housing, you get them in housing. And then you address other health issues and emotional and other issues that are prevalent in this population. Low barrier means, again, it's sort of a similar thing, but it's basically in shelters and in services. You don't have to, for instance, be sober, or you can maybe help bring your pet with you, or so it's in the past there were a lot of barriers that people felt into getting into services, and so the policy is to have a low barrier for those services. There's an emphasis on chronically homeless, so instead of spending a lot of dollars on preventing homelessness or helping people who are more recently homeless. There was a movement of the spending towards housing chronically homeless people and ending chronic homelessness. And then, again, the coordinated entry system I'll talk about a little bit later. There's a regional effort, including these grants that come from the federal government, plus some state funding for capital. And then there's also the Alameda County Public Health Department and Alameda County Care Connect, which is also a permanent housing program. So stepping back to us, since here in the city of Emeryville, we have a general plan housing element that addresses homelessness. It has 4 basic goals: to prevent homelessness, to assist those who are experiencing homelessness, to collaborate across sectors and systems, and to support access to permanent housing for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. In 2015, we went a little bit further and we actually created a homeless strategy, which has similar goals to prevent at-risk persons from becoming homeless, to remove barriers to accessing homeless services, to participate in regional strategies, and to provide housing services. So very similar, but slightly different, more precise goals. So currently, the city of Emeryville funds the winter shelter that is in Oakland. It is, we have 5 beds that are dedicated to people experiencing homelessness in Emeryville for the winter shelter. We also fund the Family Front Door, which is a sort of virtual front door for families experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. That is a specialized services to those people and specialized sort of navigation for them. And we fund Berkeley Food and Housing program that does our outreach and harm reduction services here part-time in the city. So since we did the housing strategy, a lot has changed. The implementation of coordinated entry system, which again I'll talk about in detail later, obviously a huge increase in homelessness, and then the public safety issues related to people experiencing homelessness and the sort of situations where they find themselves and what that means for safety. So people experiencing homelessness in Emeryville often live in unsafe conditions. They are cooking on open flames in wooden shelters, maybe leaning on buildings or fences. They set up tents in the public right-of-way, sometimes blocking access. There's issues with vector and waste and garbage. And in one case, indecent exposure, and also trespassing on private property as finding a place to sleep. Let's see, where are we? So the coordinated entry system. So the coordinated entry system was mandated by the federal government for all continuums of care. Alameda County is the continuum of care that is funded, that funds resources here in Emeryville as well as the rest of the county. The coordinated entry system, it means that essentially a person experiencing homelessness or risk of homelessness has kind of one place that they start from, and then they go to homeless centers. And there are in the North County, there's 2 homeless centers. There's Berkeley's, which is run by Berkeley Food and Housing. It's the Berkeley Hub. It covers the cities of Albany, Berkeley, and Emeryville. There's also an Oakland hub that covers Oakland and Piedmont, and then there's 3 other that are in the Mid-County and the South County. The coordinated entry system is a system that where everybody in the county has the same assessment tool. Everybody is assessed once. They go through the assessment tool, and then their needs are sort of ranked. And the idea is to match their needs with the services that are available, and to also sort their needs into the highest need category, and that people who have the highest need get the services first. So the staff went about looking at our current situation, and we interviewed other jurisdictions, other service providers, our service providers, but also other service providers, and city departments, public works, and law enforcement. And then we looked at best practices and our general plan. And through that process, we came up with a series of needs and gaps. So our needs and gaps are, we need to update our homeless strategy to meet the current and anticipated needs. We need to update our homeless strategy to match the coordinated entry system now that we have one in Alameda County, and also to recognize that because of the coordinated entry system, all the services that are available, people are sorted. And if people experiencing homelessness in Emeryville are not assessed to have the highest needs, then they won't have access to the services, because the services are available to people with the highest needs. And then we identified an increased need for outreach and housing navigation for people experiencing homelessness. We also wanted to increase the coordination between providers and city departments. We do this already, but we're proposing, we'll see in the strategy, a new way of doing that. We want to increase the information about our homeless population because we don't have very much right now. And our part-time outreach providers are gathering some information, and we do get reports, but it's not, as robust as it would to help us set policy. And we'd like to have more information to help council set policy in the future. And then we need to be able to quickly address needs to deal with immediate health issues and to make services available to prevent homelessness. So the proposed updates to the housing strategy are just to align it with the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness recommendations for best practices. The key updates include each goal now is aligned with an action. Before we just had goals, and now we have an action item. So it's kind of similar to the way our housing element is set up. Again, we're proposing regular meetings between the stakeholders, including housing staff, the service providers, public works, and law enforcement, and anyone else we need to draw in so that we can have these meetings and talk about cases, make sure nobody's slipped through, that the police department might know about somebody, or the fire department might have run into somebody, or public works might have run into somebody. And we want to make sure that everybody who has information on people experiencing homelessness are bringing it to one place so that our outreach provider can identify and outreach to those people. And then we're improving our guidelines for the encampment cleanups. So the other piece that we want to update to match what we need to do and the gaps in and the gaps that we have identified is to update the funding. So we're proposing to maintain the funding for the Family Front Door and the winter shelter as it is, and to increase the Berkeley Food and Housing Project's contracts from $40,000 to $235,000 annually, to include, instead of our part-time case managers are here 13 to 15 hours a week, we'll have a full-time case manager and outreach coordinator doing housing navigation and outreach, and that staff person is dedicated to Emeryville. This is actually the same model that Albany uses, that they used for the Albany Bowl, and they continue to use. We also are proposing $30,000 for emerging needs funds for things such as security deposit, pest infestations, vaccination, the mobile health care van, domestic violence shelter, housing, hotel vouchers, and service incentives to get people to services, to get people to, for instance, if we were to have a vaccination day, some incentives to get them to use those vaccinations or to use the mobile healthcare van. Or if we have a shower facility, there is mobile shower and washer dryer facilities. So we want to be able to, when people are in need, just to be able to immediately sort of deal with the situation. I could go on for hours about different situations that have come up. And then finally, what we'd like to do is to have 5 slots of rapid rehousing support for individuals. Rapid rehousing is a system where, again, it's a housing first system where you take a household that's experiencing homelessness and you put them in a housing situation. You provide services and counseling to them, including helping them increase their income, any other stabilizing things that they need. And then over a period of time, you phase out that assistance and they become a self-sustaining household that doesn't have any rental assistance, and they don't move. They stay in that unit. So you put them in a unit that you feel over a period of time, generally 12 months, that at some point they will be able to live in that unit. They will have the income and ability to maintain that unit without rental assistance from the city of Emeryville. Emerging needs, since we talked about this a little bit already, the type of things that we want to use it for. The other thing that staff has been able to do is to work with Alameda County Public Health to understand better their mobile services, since we don't have a shelter here and we don't have a sort of a hub, our own front door. We want to make more mobile services available occasionally to people experiencing homelessness in our community, and so we're working forward with them, and they're one of the stakeholders that we've been working with and getting ideas about where our gaps are. So here, our proposal is, here's the current and proposed Emeryville funding for homeless services. Going to increase our staffing cost for the outreach and case management. We're going to have about 5 slots for rapid rehousing, and we want $30,000 for the Emerging Needs Fund, and then, as I said, keep the same funding for the winter shelter and the family front door. We currently have, in this fiscal year, we have $80,000 budgeted. We have $100,000 budgeted for next fiscal year, so we need an additional appropriation of $205,000. And the recommended actions are to adopt the amended and restated Emeryville Homeless Strategy, to authorize the city manager to enter into a PSA with Berkeley Food and Housing, to authorize the city manager to enter into MOUs with the city of Oakland for the family front door and the winter shelter. And today we have our indispensable intern, Catlin Gray, who was very instrumental in getting us here. Today's her last day. So I want to really give her a lot of credit for getting us here and helping us really understand the needs that we have. And also, Sharon Layton is here from Berkeley Food and Housing if you have any questions for them.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Are there questions for Catherine? Okay. Are there questions for Berkeley Food and Housing?
Yes.
Yes. Could you come up? Member Donahue.
I can imagine that there are a lot of different kinds of homelessness that you serve.
Yes.
Can I assume that student homelessness is not one of those things?
Depends where. I mean, there are people who are homeless also trying to go to school. So in Berkeley, there's a lot of students in many of the schools there, and I'm sure there are across the country, who are absolutely homeless and trying to go to school.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, it's really
especially
difficult.
in these times.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult.
Berkeley students, some of them just cannot afford housing.
Yeah, that's true.
But in that category, they would be low on the priority because they wouldn't be perceived of as being long-term homeless.
Most likely. But
So
yeah, I mean, the really good thing about the assessment tool that Alameda County is using is that it takes into consideration way more than just your housing barriers. It takes into consideration physical health, mental health, and all kinds of lack of support, which obviously a lot of young people have. So it's a pretty robust, comprehensive tool. So you get a bigger picture. But yes, there are a lot of people who are homeless, as we know, and there are not as many resources as we need. So there is a huge gap. So we are thinking that the coordinated entry system will serve about 10% of the people who are homeless with the HUD mandate. And the conversation that many of us are having in the community is what do we do with the other 90% of people who there are no resources for?
I've seen a facility that is right on the Oakland-Berkeley border, right next to a sculpture called Here, There, at, I guess it's Stanford and MLK. There are bathrooms and hand washing stations.
Yes.
This seems like public health is really being considered.
Yes.
And that does part of this budget help cover that for people that are not housed? Is part of the monies that would be spent addressing this kind of public health need?
So sort of indirectly, I would say, in that particular encampment is in Berkeley. It's about 2 blocks from my office. And the city of Berkeley has been ambivalent about putting in sort of toilets and hand washing stations. So some of the sites of the encampment that you see, the general public are paying for those particular facilities. They're not necessarily city services. And this particular grant that we're talking about here, this particular contract, would not cover those kind of facilities in Emeryville. What it would cover is the rapid rehousing, and it would cover outreach, and but it would cover housing navigation, which is a way to get people from homelessness back into housing. And what that takes is a huge amount of harm reduction. So that might include being able to transport people to places where they might be able to use showers, or places where there are bathrooms. In Albany, we have a contract, and this is sort of a replication of that contract. It's been extremely successful, and our housing navigator takes people to the Albany showers, so and transports them. So that is a big use and a big help if there's such a thing. And certainly if there are mobile showers and mobile facilities, then people would be transported.
Okay, I have questions also about how the budget for Emeryville was arrived at. Can you answer those, or is that Catherine's?
Yes, I helped write that. Yes, so I think we looked at, so basically we made a replica of the program that we've been operating in the city of Albany for the last 4 or 5 years. And so we took the costs, they're the same costs, the cost to hire one full-time staff, the overhead for that, which is very small, the administration of that, which is 10%, which is standard across all cities. And then so the I think it's $65,000, it's slightly misleading in that 138,000 of that, I was going to do that on my head, $138,000 of that is actually pass-through money. That means that goes directly to the clients, that doesn't go to the organization. So that's money that will be paid as security deposit and rent. So we just based everything off of those numbers. The $30,000 for emerging needs funds is something that is slightly unique to Emeryville and is a very, very good idea in my mind, because you can do so much with that kind of flexible money. You can prevent people from becoming homeless. You can take people and get them the things that they need to get back into homes. So ID is a really ridiculous thing, but you'd be able to use it for those things, getting somebody a birth certificate out of state. So it uses those kinds of small incremental things. That $30,000 is, goes quite far, but it also makes a big difference really quickly. So we just based it on what we know works, what's been really, really effective in the city of Albany, that now the homelessness rates are lower, and we've housed and retained housing for 95% of the people over the last 4 years. And these were people that came off of the Albany bulb, where there were people that were extremely long-term homelessness with lots of issues. So it's been very, very successful.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Member Martinez?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My question was regarding the proposed full-time outreach and case management position.
Yes.
Would this person be predominantly working with clients in Emeryville or clients from Emeryville?
Yes, only with clients in Emeryville. It would be a dedicated staff person that you don't have right now.
And what percentage of time do they spend in the field? And when they're not in the field, what are they doing?
So they would spend the bulk of their time. I mean, there's a little bit of administration. We use a service called HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. We have to put put client data in, case notes, things like that. So administrative time is probably 10% of their time. There's a few meetings. We'd expect them to go to some regional meetings, which would be a really good thing to work together regionally. There's something called a by name list meeting, which is like a case conference. So they'd go to those. And as Catherine talked about, maybe partnering with the police department here and other people. But outside of that, the rest of the time would be out on the street or taking people to appointments or making sure that they're connecting them to other services. So you have services that people who are homeless need that are beyond housing. And the housing navigator is able to make sure they're getting to the doctor, that they're on Medi-Cal if they're eligible for that, which most people are, so that it helps fulfill like the whole entire wellness of a person. Clearly, we want people who are homeless to not be homeless, but on that, because housing is so hard and so difficult, along the way you want to provide as many services. So they wrap those services around and they know those services in the community. It's also really important that it's a regional approach. So we'd be really thrilled because Berkeley Food and Housing is the lead for the North County Hub, which is Emeryville, Albany, and Berkeley. So it's really good to have a dedicated Emeryville person there, because then they work with the Berkeley people and they work with the Albany people, and all of a sudden we have, as you know, people move around all the time. We're keeping track of everybody, and then they cross into Oakland, so we're monitoring that. So it's a fantastic idea.
So how many staff do you have doing this work in Albany right now? Which is
one.
Okay.
So it's exactly,
which is a similar size.
We totally replicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in Berkeley, we have 8.5 of this particular position.
And if I were an unhoused person on the street here in Emeryville and I came into contact with this outreach worker, how often would I be able to expect to see them?
Depending on the need of the person, as often as we could provide Monday through Friday. The only thing we don't have is weekend coverage. But the whole idea is to get to know people, and the whole idea is to become part of the fabric of that person's support system. Okay. So the whole idea is, if that person is needed to be seen, that's what's been great about Albany, is we've been able to see people daily. And we've also been able then to scale it down to once a month if that's what's needed. So it's really, really flexible, because literally in Albany, someone from the Health and Human Service Department will call us and we'll deploy. It's like there's someone on the corner of da-da-da-da-da, and then boom, we're out. We're able to go there, do the work, do the assessment, get them on the by name list, which means they'll get services throughout Alameda County, which also takes the burden off of Emeryville.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Member Pats, do you have some questions?
Not at this time.
I have questions, but I would like to hear from the public because I have extensive questions.
Shall I sit down?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to mention one more thing. Albany also provides access to showers and a van, which we are not proposing. Albany has provided Berkeley Food and Housing with a van, and they also have access to public shower facilities. We're looking at a more mobile shower facility that would be part of the emerging needs funds if we can find that service. But we also, we're pretty small, so we haven't asked for funding to provide a van for Berkeley Food Housing.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm going to open it for public comment. Members of the public who wish to come and speak have 3 minutes to speak.
Councilors, Mr. Mayor, Bill Reuter speaking as chair of the Budget Advisory Committee. My wife and I were trying to get the exact amount required, budgeted for this project, the total. Could someone give me that figure?
The total amount is $305,000, which is a $205,000 difference from what we originally appropriated.
Thanks very much.
Welcome.
I just want to make sure I had that clear.
Yep. Other members of the public who have questions or comments?
Mayor Bowters and council members, I just think this is the only way to go. It's so important and it's humane, and it just makes sense to be able to have integrated systems and a seamless system in our part of the Bay Area. So I think this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who wish to comment? Seeing none, the public comment is closed. Members, we've heard your questions. Are you okay with me asking questions first? I just didn't want to hold the public comment back. Could you both come back up? I have a series of questions. So my first question is around the largest item on this to be adjusted, which is the rapid rehousing component. Who is managing the rapid rehousing? Where is it located?
So in terms of where it's located, it's not located anywhere particularly. I mean, it comes, the
Navigator will find it?
The Navigator will find the housing. That's part of their job. And then we have a system in our agency where people fill out forms to request the what we call temporary financial assistance, which is the leasing stuff. And then we have checks and balances. We have about 6 or 7 checks and balances we literally last year, we put $800,000 in the city of Berkeley on the ground through rapid rehousing. And of course, none of that housing was in Berkeley, but we spent $800,000 in rapid rehousing. So we know how to do that really well. And so it's out of our Fairview office in Berkeley.
And do you have time restrictions on how long a person can receive rapid rehousing assistance?
So the county, Alameda County, just made a county-wide policy, which I helped write. And at this point, they have determined that somebody would be able to get a subsidy for up to 9 months. And so, and that is based on the fact that who it's aimed at. So that is changing. So it is a slightly out of sync with the HUD mandate. So chronically homeless people typically come in with no income or such low income that picking up housing in the Bay Area in a single apartment of their own is almost prohibitive. We do everything we can to find those apartments, but they're few and far between. So the idea is that the rapid rehousing money will go to people who have a little more depth of income and a little more depth of capacity. So that's new. We tried at Berkeley Food and Housing, so I've been in the field 33 years. We tried this last year to put people in rapid rehousing based on absolutely no indication of whether they would be able to pick it up or not. That was the best practices coming out of the National Alliance to End Homelessness. It was a spectacular failure. Out of the 66 people we put into rapid rehousing, 5 could pick it up. I've spent the last 6 months begging Alameda County for permanent supportive housing vouchers. I'm happy to report that I was successful, and we've housed all of them now.
How many vouchers did you get?
45. That's a miracle.
That's good. That's very good.
There's none left now. We took them all. So because we were ahead, because we put coordinated entry in 2 years in advance of Alameda County. So we managed to get great outcomes, but that's an anomaly. It's not going to be the rule. So the situation is dire. So you don't want to put anybody into rapid rehousing unless they have the capacity to be able to pick up the subsidy, because you're going to make them homeless again. So Alameda County came up with this policy. It just got voted through the Everyone Home Board, Leadership Board, in April.
So I've worked on homelessness for 15 years.
I know.
Yeah.
I heard you talk at the symposium.
Yeah, and I have a lot of questions about the ask you have tonight. So are you familiar with the governor's May revise from last Friday?
I am not.
Okay, so in the May revise, the governor, in 2014, I helped craft the CalWorks Housing Support Program for the state. Okay. And it began as a $20 million program statewide, and it's after 2 budget augmentations that we've fought for the last couple of years, it was $47.5 million this year, and the governor is increasing it to $72 million for 18-19 and to $93 million in 19-20, which is the single largest program he's increasing funding for, because he doesn't believe in subsidies that are permanent. And he doesn't believe entitlement programs should exist. And so it is the only discretionary program, other than a couple one-time things he's doing this year, that he's giving ongoing increasing allocations to. And it's designed to assist people in welfare to work programs at CalWorks, as you're probably familiar.
Yeah, we ran a CalWorks program.
Yeah, and And so I'm trying to figure out here, I have all my cups up here because I was prepared to demonstrate coordinated entry for some folks. Because I think it's, yeah, okay. So one of the things I think people need to understand is that when we talk about coordinated entry, we need to talk about how we use resources. And so we have different things that all fall within the Housing First spectrum. Everything from permanent supportive housing, which is designed to assist people who are very high barrier, chronic mental health and substance use issues, people who have been chronically homeless, generally for over 12 months. We have over here rapid rehousing, which is designed for lower barrier people, to your point, and NAEH, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, supports, and I agree that it's a Housing First practice, but it's designed for people who are lower barrier, who can keep the housing after they've had some short period of assistance and find income. And in between, we have other types of permanent subsidized housing that go to people who need long-term subsidies but maybe don't need supportive services. Also not up here is just market housing, which is obviously an option. On the side, you have diversion, right? And so the goal with the coordinated entry system for the public's benefit is that previously we would have people who would come in and they would apply here, and then they would apply here, and then they would apply here, and then they would apply here. They'd go everywhere. And the idea, and the problem became that people would find a place where they got off a wait list, but it wasn't perhaps the best match between the resource and the human. And so individually tailored programs in coordinated entry allow everybody to go through a funnel at the top where they're assessed with a uniform assessment, and it determines which bucket they go into. Right. So that a person who is high needs and high barrier is put first in the line for supportive housing, and a person who has some income or employment and has children can go into a rapid rehousing model where they're more likely to become self-sustaining. And so this is the right way to go, and the county is very slow, in my opinion, to do this. Is very slow. As someone who helped run a coordinated entry system in Illinois 10 years ago, this is a very slow process that California is going through. But there are a lot of people who contact the system who can be diverted because they think they need services, but they're actually functioning enough, or they have the income to actually afford market rent in some other capacity, and they're not intended for the homeless services system. So my issue with the ask, because I do have an issue with the ask, my issue with the ask is that there are more and more state resources being put into rapid rehousing, and it's not a bad thing. Anytime we take any person at risk of homelessness or who is homeless and move them into a place of stability, that's a positive outcome. My concern as somebody who has personal and professional experience with this issue is that we do not invest in this enough anywhere. And to your point about 44 or 45 vouchers, there should be a lot more of those. Right. Because if we really want to actually curb all the other costs we have related to public works, trash, public health, public safety expenditures, we have to make the investment in the people who are constantly consuming our local services dollars. And so my question is, why aren't you asking instead for us to fund 1 or 2 permanent supportive housing beds someplace where you actually have a contract with a permanent supportive housing provider, and perhaps we're taking 2 high barrier people who don't get services and funding from any other place in the state regularly and asking us to assist those people instead?
So we have, there's a couple of reasons for that. Permanent supportive housing is to take and create a permanent supportive housing is a year after year after year
sure.
Commitment.
Sure.
And so the council would have to basically make a commitment that they're providing this funding year after year after year. So it's actually a heavier ask in many ways. Also, we're aware of our population, and we definitely have people who need permanent supportive housing, but they also are eligible through the assessment tool for some of the county, and the county will be applying to the state for rapid rehousing funding. What we're trying to do is to deal with the fact that people who are experiencing homelessness in Emeryville aren't making it up through the county, and so we are focusing some money just for people in Emeryville. And we certainly are hoping to build, not just provide, but build permanent supportive housing. And we are looking, one of the grant that we just got from MTC, one of the things that we're looking at is how to purchase in market rate housing, special needs housing uses, of which supportive housing would be one, So it's not something that we're not looking at, it's just that we're not ready. And we are hoping, we've received that grant, and that was one of the tenets of that grant, was how to price purchasing, affordability, and services, and maybe even doing like a master leasing program with a service provider, so that the market rate developer doesn't end up being on the hook to providing the services, or even necessarily interacting in a lot of ways with the tenant. So master leasing is something that mental health services have used for a long time, and we're going to try and look at it. That's one of the technical assistance.
When we say we, though, are we meaning the city, or are we meaning Berkeley Food and Housing?
The city.
Okay.
The city is going down that road, not just for permanent supportive housing, but for other special needs housing. So we can purchase affordability from market rate developers. And we've done that before, but only for extremely low income. We haven't done it for special needs populations. So there's kind of a next layer of sort of organizing our thoughts around purchasing affordability in market rate projects and for special needs. And so that's why we asked and we received assistance in going through that exercise, because other cities don't do that. It's not something that we can just pick up and say, oh, that person does that, city does that, we'll just do it here. It's actually pretty new. It did, at Courtyards, we have 3 supportive housing units that we were able to negotiate for developmentally disabled people, and that's been really, really successful. But we want to expand it to different types of supportive housing, and trying to match it up with other funding sources. So the other like the state funding sources, the capital funding sources, and the public health service money, so that we can make the housing that we're purchasing, the affordable housing that we're purchasing, match with some sort of services, so that the person who's in that housing unit has year after year after year access to those services, rather than sort of, and rapid rehousing is really just a one-time thing for a household. And so it's a totally different.
That's the issue with the 9 months for me, is that there are some people we put into rapid rehousing because Housing First by its nature is designed to take the person as they are and then to work with them on the issues that give rise to their homelessness. But once you house somebody, you often learn, not in many cases, but in some cases, that people have much deeper needs than what appear on the surface, and that homelessness, even a person who has a job, the experience of homelessness or the onset of a mental health issue actually is on a trajectory that makes supportive housing the ultimate location for that person to be permanently housed. And so although it's not a high percentage of people, it's a significant enough percentage where under a Housing First model, you in theory do not take the housing away. That is the whole reason why we moved away from transitional housing after years of that very failed model, which was, let's construct a time period artificially over which you can have housing that disregards your individual needs and the barriers you have, right? And so we're still doing it. There's still counties still, and I get they want to make the best use of all their resources and ensure they can help as many people as possible. But I feel like rapid rehousing has kind of backdoored itself into being transitional housing again, and we don't really remove our reliance on that model, which has been demonstrably shown, even if we're saying it's 9 months and it's not 3 or 6, and or transitional housing used to have requirements like you had to come clean and sober in order to get it to begin with. We have removed some of those barriers at the outset, but what we don't have is we have a mother with a child who at 7th month is not able to focus on her welfare to work training and get into her job placement because she's worried that if she doesn't have the job lined up, she is going to be on the street.
So I mostly agree with you. I think rapid rehousing was conceived, as you know, for families in the Midwest where a rent was, $400 to $600. It was not conceived of for high rent markets. I was just at a rapid rehousing national conference in LA, and I brought this up to the National Alliance because they've sort of been swallowed a Kool-Aid that basically has said that rapid rehousing is cheaper and more affordable than transitional housing, than permanent supportive housing, therefore it should work for everybody. And I agree with you, it doesn't. I think where it can work, so when people go, unlike transitional housing, when you go into transitional housing, after 90 days, you lose your chronic homeless status, right? Rapid rehousing, you don't. So in many cases, the idea of rapid rehousing is like a bridge housing, right? It's like put people in housing, get them used to housing, get them wanting housing, get their issues working on, and then hopefully, it's a little bit like chicken, hopefully, a PSH unit comes up, or hopefully something happens. That's sort of what we've been doing, and I don't think it's been particularly smart, but I think we've gotten much, much smarter in the last year. So I think what we know now is that people that are on a fixed income, you can't put them into a rental property that is twice as much, or $400 even more. You just can't do that. People have been doing that, and it's just been exactly what you said, a disaster. But what we do know is if we put people in that have at least a rental history, people who are probably more newly homeless, people who are never, as Catherine said, going to show up on the top list of this by name list, this magical scoring that's happening on this assessment tool. Those people are not going to get any services. Rapid rehousing can actually be very effective for those people. We can find those people. We know what those people look like. Then they can get in. The vets have been doing it very, very successfully. We run a veterans program with $3 million. We're in 5 counties. We understand sort of what needs to happen, who is best suited in the bucket for rapid rehousing. We understand that more. I mean, some of us knew, but no one would listen. But we basically know that now. So in Emeryville, if you have 5 slots of that, 5 people, it's starfish going back into the sea, right? 5 people, 5 households are going to get off of the list, where they never would get off of the list, back on their feet, back into housing. In terms of permanent supportive housing, yes, we have to create more. We have to create affordable housing. That's a huge issue. That's a much bigger issue than any of us can manage.
Well, we have a ballot measure, and we're asking the public to support exactly that.
Exactly.
Because it's part of the housing plan, I think.
Yeah, and what professionally and personally I believe is that we've got to look for affordability, right? We can't have quick fixes to long-term institutionalized issues. So the question is, how do we do that? And this is a little drop in the bucket. Everybody puts a little drop in the bucket. It gets bigger, but we do need exactly what we were talking about at Symposium, a regional approach and beyond, right? So that's sort of my 10 cents on. I could talk all night, as you could probably.
Yeah, no, I have a few other questions, and I want to turn it over to my colleagues. So on the rapid rehousing units, the costs that are covered, I heard you say it includes security deposit and rent, obviously. Does it include relocation costs for somebody who's moving out of being evicted or who's got stuff and needs to have transitional costs paid for transportation?
We might use emerging needs.
Yeah, that's where we would use those emerging needs funds. So
Okay.
you braid the funding.
Okay, so what about furniture?
You could use that with emerging needs. That's what we do now. I mean, when we move people into rapid rehousing, now we get them a bed and, a few pots and pans, broom.
So when they move out, do they get to keep those items?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
And the security deposit.
And the deposit goes to them. Okay, that's nice to know. The other couple of things, the county, the state has another $250 million in the proposed Governors May revise that will go to cities and to cities that demonstrate they are working in partnership with other cities using coordinated entry and doing a collaborative regional approach. It requires several things in order to be eligible. There will be cities that are going to lobby very hard to increase that through the legislative budget consolidation process in the next month from 250 to something closer to $500 million or $1 billion. My question for you is, why should we spend this money today versus wait until July to see if that gets approved in the budget, if that money could all be approved by the state then?
So the way the current legislation works is the most money goes to the cities with the most people counted in the homeless count. And currently, cities that have less than 250 people in the homeless point in time count only all of those cities statewide, there's only $2 million for them.
Okay.
So it's not something, even if you quadruple that, there's a lot of cities who are going to be applying for, I mean, I just don't think, I think we'll be very competitive and we can be ready, but I don't think we'll be able to supplant the funds that we're asking for today, unfortunately.
Do you think there's a value to us declaring a shelter crisis?
Well, there's a couple of things that develop, I mean, that's not really part of this.
No, but a lot of the funding that will be coming is hinged upon a city having made a condition.
This funding, certainly.
Yes.
So Alameda County has declared a shelter crisis, so any funding that is in kind of a block that goes to counties, we will already be covered by. So I just want to say that. The things that shelter crisis, declaring a shelter crisis does for you is it means that it clears away some of the health and safety and building code and zoning issues that you would need to set up a sanctioned encampment or a navigation center or an emergency shelter. So having declared that crisis, you can bypass a lot of the building codes and health and safety codes that you would need. That's how Oakland is able to house people in tough sheds.
Yeah.
And how San Francisco is able to have those navigation centers. It's how you can have sanctioned encampments where all there is a porta potty and washing stations, that sort of thing. So that is, aside from funding, that's what declaring a shelter crisis can do for you. It can create, now those things are so just declaring that is one thing, but then if you decide to actually create an encampment, that's way beyond the funding that we're asking for here, and the need for security and case management and just the physical needs of the site are very, very high. I have a budget if you want for the tough shed. I can share with you.
That's okay right now. I don't need that right now. I have a couple other questions, then I want to stop asking questions. So one is a comment, which is, I heard you say in the emergent funds category, you were paying for state IDs. So I also helped the speaker write the bill that makes that free. So why are we paying for that?
No, I understand that. I misspoke on that part. I mean,
Okay.
I meant to say it's the birth certificates and things like that.
Well, those are free too.
Not from out of state.
Not out of state, they're not.
Oh, not out of, well, how many people out of state are we serving, do we think? A lot of them right
A
now?
lot of people have been born out of state.
Okay.
Who are homeless.
So are you a AB 1733 provider? Are you certified with DMV and the county recorder's office to verify homelessness for people in order to get the waivers? Do you have that certification?
Yes,
you have the certification?
Yes, we do, and everyone on outreach carries those papers.
Okay. And then my last item is just, when I look at the total cost, you multiply this over a number of years of doing this in theory. Is there any reason why the city shouldn't consider as a long-term strategy acquiring a 5 to 10 unit small building in the city and managing an agreement with a nonprofit provider to actually have our own rapid rehousing units that we just basically move people in and out of? We can just take them off our own street and put them in our own building.
That would be transitional housing if you're moving people in and out of it.
Well, no, rapid rehousing, they stay as long as they need. We don't have a time limit from the county on them, but we can work with them and then and move them once a placement becomes available in a more permanent location. Why are we not? I saw you nod, so maybe you agree with me. Why don't we consider that plan?
So there's actually quite a few models that we would like to look at when we have funding. There's the model where you purchase or build a, gosh, what do they call it? When people live together, there's a name for that in homeless.
Co-housing?
What is it called? There's a name for, we actually have it in here, but I forget.
They share a room, you mean?
So not where you share rooms. So St. Mary's Center for the Homeless Senior Center does this. They have bought a couple of houses, and they have made, they've put formerly homeless people living in those houses, permanent supportive housing, where it's a shared sort of living situation where each person has a bedroom, or they might have to share a bedroom if the bedroom is large, but normally in these old houses they're not. And then they have shared kitchen and bathroom and living facilities. So that's definitely something that we would be interested in doing. and we actually, I don't know if you're aware, but we have a site that we identified where the city owns, a very small site over on Adeline and 36th, where we are actually looking at a 3 micro units, or a larger house to house formerly homeless people. It's not in the CIP, but that's something that's on my plate. And we have.
Please put it in the CIP.
Okay, but in addition, if the bond passes, right, then we have one of the things that we have in the bond is the ability to purchase units, and so that's something that we are looking at. Again, it would be we would want a provider associated with that housing, a specialist provider. It depends on the population that we, can fund. It could be veterans, it could be seniors. It just depends on the funding sources that are available that make the most sense for the units that we purchase. So it's on our radar. Okay. It's just not part of this proposal. And, this is our first, so back in, when's the ARA funds? 2011, 2010. We also worked with Albany, Berkeley, and Emeryville also had a rapid rehousing program funded with ARA funds, and it was very successful. And so and that was more of a diversion program, though. It was people at risk of homelessness who were then rehoused in places that they could afford, and that was 24 months at that time. And it was a very successful program. I can't remember what our success rate was, but it was really high. And so this is sort of, we're stepping back into that, and those funds were, again, those are available through those 3 jurisdictions, and this is sort of identifying people experiencing homelessness in Emeryville, which the case manager would be working with people, and they would be working. It would take a while before that case manager would sort of be ready to start placing people, to know enough about them, to have enough their trust, and to understand their situation and assess their capacity before we would start using these funds. But the idea is that they're there. And one of the things that we know, because we've been doing this for a while, that our outreach providers go out and they're talking to people, and the people say, "You have no housing for me, leave me alone." And that's true. They're absolutely right.
That was my biggest barrier when I was a service provider, was that the challenge is that people come into programs that are either time limited or where there's no output. Like Berkeley is building this navigation center, and I think that it's great that Berkeley is undertaking something that's very important, but there is not permanent housing to match this, and I don't know what the plan is with that, but I think it is a very dangerous plan, because you are going to actually have a lot of people who will go there to get services, who will then feel like they have been put in a pen with other people who have very serious mental health issues, who are living on the street because family and other places cannot keep them in the house safely, and people are going to not trust the city to actually serve them because they're going to say, well, where's the housing I'm going out to? I think that the strategy is very short-sighted, personally. It looks like you're agreeing with me. Let's go ahead. You can speak.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been vehemently opposed to that.
Yeah, I think it's
I've
very
gone all the
short-sighted.
way through the city council. I've spoken to every single city council member. I've got people to go and rally behind it. I think that it's a path to no housing.
Yep.
We already know that there are about 50 to 100 permanent supportive housing vouchers across the entire county of Alameda in any given year. So why would you move 50 people into portables with no way to exit them? And also, why would you put them in there with a time limit? If you've got to find housing within 3 months, then the stats that we have at the coordinated entry show that we've not been able to get anybody into housing in less than 4 months, even using rapid rehousing. And that permanent supportive housing is sort of a Willy Wonka ticket at this point.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge amount of money, $2.4 million, that could be used for permanent housing.
Yeah.
All right. And we in the provider community have been, all of us have had a voice, and all of us have vehemently opposed it because we don't think that it's going to get people what they need. But Berkeley City Council has just, and city staff also vehemently opposed it. So it is Berkeley City Council and the mayor that are on this path.
I believe that the people who are pushing that are well-intended. Well-intended.
But
I think they are not listening to expert advice. Exactly. I resisted going to the auditorium to speak on this after many people asked me to, because I just feel like my position doesn't really afford me that anymore in some ways. But I think that what we're trying to do here in the city with Measure C is the proper approach to creating a long-term solution, and we need to just keep doing that.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and I just don't think people are thinking very carefully about how this will impact an entire generation of people from accepting city services, and how much harder it is going to be to remove people from homelessness. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where people say, well, the homeless don't want to be housed. Well, no, they don't want to go in and be treated like an animal for 3 or 6 or 9 months and promised things and told that they need to, overcome their mental health issue on their own to find housing, when they have all these arrests for these stupid crimes of poverty for sleeping in parks. Totally. And I think that what ends up happening in the end is, once this thing is done, is that there will now be conditions on people that they will be subjected to criminalization if they don't go there.
Well, that is exactly what they're doing.
That's going to be exactly what happens.
They said if the Second Street people do not want to move if they do not want to move in there, then they will be able to erase the encampment.
Yeah.
So it's what Berkeley does. It's carrot stick. I've worked in Berkeley for 20 odd years, so I mean, I'm just going to speak the truth, but that is the truth, and I've been told that. So I think it's very, very delusional, and I think it's a huge waste of public money.
I do too.
And and we've all said that. I'd like you to know that, for the record, all the nonprofits said that, and all the staff at the housing department said that, and we were ignored. And it's quite heartbreaking, actually, because we are in the trenches every single day, and we're already spending over $2 million for coordinated entry, creating sort of an industrialized homeless complex in the same way we've done with the prison system. And I think that it's not the right way to go. And what we need to do is do permanent housing, affordable housing, and permanent supportive housing. I will just say one last thing, though, on the rapid rehousing here. I do think it is in Emeryville's best interests in the short term to do a contract like this. And it's not because I need the contract. I don't need to hire any more people. It's really because if you don't have any rapid rehousing in the city, then you won't be able to house anyone, because your people won't get to the top of the list and get on those permanent supportive housing things. They're not chronic enough, because they bounce too much in Emeryville. So you'll at least be able to help 5 as opposed to none. And I know that's terrible, but I think it's worth it. And I think it's worth it for the regional piece, that you're a player, that you're at the table, that you're replicating what's been successful in Albany. And I think for that, I mean, obviously it's good for the 5 people, don't get me wrong, but it's really good for that, because then together we have more clout to actually be able to address exactly what you're saying, which is that cup there, which is the most important cup and the most under-resourced cup that we have. So that's my...
I have one last comment, and then I need to really... My colleagues have humored me, and they know that this is an item I care a lot about, so I really appreciate their indulgence. But, I agree with everything you just said. And I think when we look at how to regionally approach this, I mean, I'll be very honest, in a private meeting of mayors the other night, I had some choice words for some people at the county about, well, we're holding on to a 50% reserve of Prop 63 Mental Health Services Act money, and they're saying that statute requires that. The statute does not require you hold 50% of the money in reserve. The statute says it's a prudent reserve to ensure continuity in services, and we have money to provide the services to people in permanent supportive housing. It's not being spent. It needs to be allocated. Those conversations need to continue, but what needs to happen is the region needs to sit down and look at what resources are available, and instead of just picking whatever is politically popular, whether that is housing families with rapid rehousing, because that is my only issue with the ask, is not that you are doing the wrong thing here, is that I I have a lot of experience with people who are chronically homeless, and it is such an underserved and high need area, and it is just frustrating to see resources get diverted to very specific groups of people who are more politically favorable than other groups of people. And we need to actually look at the whole system, look at the resources, and then appropriate resources in a proportion that meets where the needs get met, which means a small amount for shelter services, an amount for navigation, a very large investment in housing itself with wraparound services. And that analysis is not being done regionally. And so this is a frustration I don't think I'm alone on, but I've had for a long time. But I'm grateful to all the time you've given answering the questions. I appreciate your work as someone in solidarity on housing justice. So with that, I want to thank all of you for really letting me take some time with the questions on that. But I would like to begin with Member Martinez.
Thank you for your in-depth comments, and not to make any comment on your concerns, but there is a visible contingent of unhoused folks in Emeryville who self-identify as travelers. And I was wondering if you could speak to how this proposed funding might affect them. I'm hesitant to call them service resistant because I think that's a politicized term that's been used in San Francisco in the criminalization of homelessness and the breaking up of encampments. But it may be a way to describe folks who are not necessarily looking for the same type of services that what I'm hearing is described as what we'd like to offer. So if you could talk about how it affects their population.
Sure. I mean, so I'm one of the founders of the youth shelter, Yay. Founded it in 2002, and we were told that all the youth were from other places, riding the rails and all that good stuff. And so I have a lot of experience with people who are sort of supposedly passing through. I think that what we need to do is, if we have boots on the ground full-time, right now it's 13 hours a week. If you have boots on the ground full-time, you make those relationships with people, and then you're able to help people decide where they want to be. One of the conversations that we need to have with people is, this is really not an affordable area to be. Not that we want to put people out of this area, and I'm not saying any of that NIMBY stuff, and I'm certainly not believing in all that poor law stuff, but just really being able to help people make smart decisions for themselves. So the resources that we would have for that are the boots on the ground to make those relationships, to have those conversations over and over and over again, and also then to be able to use emerging needs funds for Homeward Bound, for getting people tickets back home, as long as it's verified and you do all the due diligence. You're just not going to bust people out of here. We just had an experience of doing that in Berkeley with a family, and they were able to go home to her mother's house in the Midwest, and we verified everything, and that worked out really well. So we would hope that we'd be able to do some of that. We've also been doing it with the vets, the veterans, the SSVF program that we run. They've just started a new project. They chose our agency to be the people that implemented it. And so we just helped veterans, one veteran get from Southern California to Oregon, and another veteran get from Santa Rosa all the way out to Colorado. So it's that. But really what you want to do is have the relationship. Mm-hmm. That's what changes people, is the trust and the relationship, authenticity. And what I've been doing, quite frankly, because I've been so demoralized, is I went out onto the street in Berkeley a lot recently, and I asked people, what would you do if help wasn't coming? Because nobody's telling anybody the truth. And they said, well, maybe I'd make some other choices. Maybe I'd go someplace else. But I thought help was coming. And I said, I don't really think much help is coming. But, I'm not trying to be out there being a negative person, but let's be real. And so giving people honest, transparent realism in a kind, compassionate, heartfelt way is what we're trying to teach our providers to go do, and having those conversations and helping clients make choices that we all have to make. Many people can't afford to live here anymore, not just homeless people. Our staff are commuting from Stockton and stuff. So it's like having that and being really real. That's a lot of, but having that 40 hours a week is going to be very different than having it 13.
And can you talk about resources for unhoused folks with pets?
Oh, yeah. Well, There's not many shelters that will take pets. The youth shelter, yay, we created that, so you can bring your pets. So if you're lucky enough to be able to get in there, you have service dogs. Obviously, you can bring, but that's a real barrier for people. So
The only one I know is the Navigation Center in San Francisco. That's the only one I know right now.
Which one?
Navigation Center in San Francisco.
Yeah, you can take your pets there.
Yeah, but in terms
Yeah.
of just being able to walk in the door with your pet, that's...
Yeah, yay is the only shelter. That's why I created it. To have
Because a lot of these folks, I'm not saying they're the majority of folks
they're very important.
in our
The
town, but
pets
but a lot of the folks that who I said are part of that visible contingent.
Yes.
They do have pets for protection and companionship.
Yes, they do.
So that's something we see a lot in our community.
Yes, and we have to work we have to work super hard to get people housed, but we have to work even harder to get people housed with pets, just like anybody. There's people. But we do that, and we've successfully done that. A lot of the people at the Berkeley Bowl, at the Albany Bowl, had pets, and we managed to house all of them that wanted housing. I mean, not every single person at the Bowl got housed, but a vast majority of people did, and the vast majority had pets. So it is something that is a barrier, but you got to have a way to talk about it. Pets are people's support.
Yeah. Thank you.
Member Donahue, do you have any comments?
Well, I'm inclined to support this. If I look at it, we have a fund in our general fund that can handle this. I've really seen members of our community really concerned with Emeryville doing something about our homeless population. So this is doing something, and it's a good start to going along to make some permanent housing. So
thank you. Member Pats?
I'll try not to take too long because I think it's been a while on this. So thank you for your work today, and I want to thank Member Bowders for laying that out. I was excited to see how this conversation went this evening because I knew I would walk away learning something. I just want to echo what you said, Mayor Bowders, is that when we look at this at the dollar amount, we're paying it one way or the other, and it's better to do it this way because it ends up being cheaper and better for the community in the long run. And so I am very much in support of this. We often pay for the consequences of not taking action instead of paying up front. And so I want to echo what Member Donahue was saying of this is funds well spent, and the return on investment here is significant. You used the starfish analogy, not one that I love, but it's a great story, and it's exactly that. It's a huge impact on the individuals who we can help directly, but there's a broader impact on our community as well. And so I'll leave it at that.
And I would just add to what you said, which I totally agree with, that we're also paying for the consequences of poor policy decision-making that has over-criminalized poverty in a way that actually exacerbates homelessness, because so many people who could leave homelessness on their own volition there's 48,000 civil barriers in California to a person with a record. And so you have people who are incapable of getting housing and employment because they are arrested, and a lot of the arrests are inflicted by communities who choose to criminalize panhandling, sleeping on a sidewalk, sleeping in your vehicle. Those things do not leave a person's record, and they serve as barriers to people being housed. And that's why this crisis is so severe and why it is so expensive. And so hopefully people will also use this to examine some of the other policy choices that we make, because those are the reasons why we have the problem we have today. So thank you both for your presentation. We have finished the conversation. Council colleagues, there are 4 resolutions. 12.1.1 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville adopting an amended and restated Emeryville homeless strategy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion from Member Martinez.
I second.
And a second from Member Donahue to approve the motion. Madam Clerk, please call, or the resolution, please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
Item 12.1.2 is a resolution of the City Council authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Berkeley Food and Housing in an amount not to exceed $265,000 and appropriating $205 from the Affordable Housing Fund to fiscal year 18-19's Economic Development and Housing Division budget. Is there a motion?
Move the resolution.
I second.
There's a motion from Member Martinez and a second from Member Donahue to approve this resolution. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
Item 12.1.3 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville authorizing the city manager to enter into a MOU with the City of Oakland to operate the North County Family Front Door in an amount not to exceed $25,000. Is there a motion?
I move that we do that.
Second.
I have a motion from Member Donahue and a second from Member Martinez to approve this resolution. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
Item 12.1.4 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville authorizing the city manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the City of Oakland for the fiscal year 2018-19 to fund the winter shelter at an amount not to exceed $15,000. Is there a motion?
I move that we do that expenditure.
Second.
There's a motion from Member Donahue and a second from Member Martinez to approve this resolution. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
Thank you. All 4 resolutions are approved. Thank you for coming this evening. Item 12.2 is a recommendation of naming or dedication of the Emeryville Center of Community Life Gymnasium. Pedro, do you have a presentation?
I don't. I can try to answer questions or...
What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask Member Pats if he'd like to make a presentation.
I'll make a couple of quick comments. I don't think this is a particularly complicated thing, and half of us were at the community service meeting, so I'll fill you and Member Donahue in. About 9 months ago, I brought to city schools the idea of dedicating a gym after a particular person, and having talked about this for a while, I haven't seen a lot of movement, and I thought, since we have another city schools meeting coming up, I think in 2 days, that it would be worthwhile to bring it back. But in conversation at community services, it was simply that this was an idea. We'd like to see some movement. The gym has now been open for a while, and I think the opportunity to do some namings come and gone. And so we started with the criteria of the person I presented was Stephen Dane, and I think you were both there, so I won't go into too many details, but for people at home, it was a PE teacher, very popular in Emory in the 70s, who transitioned from female to male and was subsequently let go, fought to get their job back, was successful, and then released again, and eventually had to give up the fight because of finances, and has since passed away. So that is my preference, and I've heard that echoed. I don't want to speak for Member Martinez, but I think she shared that, she thought that was a solid choice. But even going beyond that, we just want to encourage the school district to take some action. And so we gave them some criteria of what we thought was important, which was, first of all, finding a person who has passed. We feel it's best to name things after people who are no longer with us. Somebody who has a deep connection to Emeryville sports. And then we've also found that it's been lacking a connection to the LGBTQ community as well. So those were our suggestions, and that's all in the staff report. And because of the quick turnaround time, it would just be, I think the staff report recommends Mayor Bowders and myself drafting the letter, and so we're just looking to get that permission today.
Thank you. I'm going to open this to public comment. Is there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Thanks for hanging in there, members of the public. Seeing none, I will, I think, can we count your comments as your comments?
I'm good.
Okay, Member Martinez.
I think you could see from the staff report that I'm supportive of the recommendation that we write a letter and say, name it Steve Dane or something else. So that is, the staff report is consistent with my my attitude on this.
Okay, Member Donahue.
I'm very in support of this. I think it's a great idea. Member Pats, I want to appreciate you following through on this.
And I want to join Member Donahue in thanking you for your leadership on this and for not letting us lose sight of recognizing people who are inspirational to our community. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to move approval.
I'll second that.
There's a motion from Member Pats and a second from Member Donahue to approve the direction provided in the staff report. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Medina is absent.
What? Should have just voted no.
No. Department head reports. Anybody want to report? Lots of microphones went straight up. That's a no across the left flank. How about on this side? Nope, no reports. Okay. Future agenda items. Requests from council members. Member Martinez.
I have one. At the next meeting, which I believe is June 5th, I would like to bring forward a resolution regarding Janus versus AFSCME, which is a case that has been heard at the Supreme Court. We have not yet heard their decision yet. But at issue in the case is the laws in 22 states which allow public unions to require that public employees who are not union members pay so-called agency or fair share fees. And the idea is that public employees who are not members benefit from the collective bargaining of that union and therefore should pay for the union's representation. In this case, there is an unrepresented employee who is suing the union, AFSCME, because he doesn't feel that he should be paying for collective bargaining. So this could have an effect on the rights of workers in many states in the union. So this is something that I feel that we should address as an employer of public sector employees, and I'd like to bring that resolution forward at our next available meeting.
Okay. Staff, is there any reason why June 5th would not be capable of being done with her request for any reason?
It would...
If I provide the resolution and supporting materials by Friday.
That's really fast. We wouldn't be able to do any evaluation.
Can you use the microphone, please, Carolyn?
I'm just concerned about whether we'd be able to anticipate to do the analysis and to anticipate any questions about what impact there might be on the city. I mean, it's fast.
Okay, can you just provide a brief example of the analysis? If it's a resolution, do you want to further explain what you're trying to accomplish?
So go ahead and you can explain what you anticipate might be the issue, and I'll bring up the sample resolution that I've already got. This is a resolution that's passed in many jurisdictions, including in San Francisco, essentially urging the mayor and high-level staff to work with unions to ensure that public sector workers maintain their rights to collectively bargain.
So it would be very helpful to have that kind of supporting documentation, and so that could be...
And I will provide all of these things specific to Emeryville by Friday. In fact, I've got everything as a template.
Okay.
I just need to fill I need to fill in some blanks.
That could work.
Okay, so hearing that, are you supportive? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so there's direction to provide that at a future agenda item on June 5th. Mr. Donahue, do you have any agenda items?
No.
Did you have anything? You know, I had one and I forgot what it was, but it was, but it wasn't for the immediate future, but it was something, and it was something I was working on with Allie, and I think she was supposed to bring it up.
Is it transportation related?
I feel like it was sustainability. We had something that we were supposed to ask for, and I forget.
Let's drill down. Is it solar? Wind?
I think she...
Sea level rise.
So what I'd like to ask,
leave an item line.
What I'd like to ask is if this is weird, but
no, I'm trying to help you because you might be able to remember if you keep saying no, it's not that.
It did require like the city attorney to look at something, which was the question I was going to ask, and I'm like flipping through my thing here, going like, oh my god, what is I'm supposed to ask for it? But it's clearly not important enough to make my memory, so it will wait till the next meeting, and I will ask at that time. So with that, Madam Clerk, the time is 9:20 and this meeting is adjourned.